The environmental crisis in the arts. Environmental concerns of Greek visual artists. The first intervention by a Greek visual artist on environmental protection was already recorded in 1876 by Kostas Barotas in his study Visual Life and Aesthetic Education in 19th century Athens. Specifically, sculptor Leonidas Drosis, in his letter, sounds the alarm regarding the imminent destruction of Lycabettus Hill by explosives. Aside from the fact that its destruction demonstrates our complete lack of aesthetic sensitivity, we shall also appear barbaric to the foreigners visiting Athens, he says. Today, there is widespread, potentially among Greek visual artists, expressing concerns about wind turbines and their potential uncontrolled proliferation. Throughout all eras, anything new generates considerable hesitation due to fear of the unknown. Indicatively, I mentioned the Facebook page, Le Vent et les Immortels, before it's too late, where selected visual artists are invited to create posters, printed and displayed in central city locations to raise awareness about the environmental crisis. We can see my contribution to the group, Le Vent et les Immortels, before it's too late. According to Panagiotis Tsiamouras, although each species and each individual being experiences it in a different way and from a different perspective, we shall share the same planet. We are largely subject to the same natural laws. If we realize that the others, human and other animals, plants, every form of life, are equally crept into this world with us, an horizon of greater compassion, solidarity, and morality opens up for us. Fundamental concepts of my conceptual and pictorial pursuits are the idea of the network, connections, the flow of time, rhythm and memory, and the links between people and space. The mapping of faces and routes through the urban landscape is a main feature of a large body of works. In solo exhibition called Sparkling, urban space-time is no longer the point. Sparkling is a meditation on the present and the future. Through the brilliance, sensitivity, and beauty of natural landscapes, I'm interested in the uncertain, dystopian condition that follows as the man-made climate crisis shows its teeth. Sparkling is the power of contrast. Through colors, dreamscapes, and expressions of beauty, I want to show the pain, despair, and deep suffering caused by layoff and apathy in the face of our self-destruction, despite existing clear scientific evidence. Crimes against nature worldwide are on the increase. How can it be that while we know, we do not react? Unlike my previous series of works, which had a more anthropocentric character, here the human figure is occasionally presented either as a huge, threatening figure or as a small abstract figure in the landscape. The human face, defined by its contour, has no particular characteristics. Humanity is summarized. It becomes an indication, a shape. The man without a face points to his lost humanity. Having lost his connection with the natural environment, he passes over it like a steamroller. In the works of the exhibition, the focus of attention is on nature and its elements. Light and its reflections play a special role in these compositions. The power and changes of light in time acquire an ontological and structural character in the creative process, with a series of cyanotypes being a special example. The intention is to revisit nature and its landscapes as if seeing them for the first time, to find the beauty in all the small moments and things that surround us, to leave behind the fixed, established, and habitual way of looking at the environment around us, to stop taking it for granted and see it from the beginning with a fresh perspective, to become aware of our essential connection to the world, to the others, human and other creatures, plants, to every form of life, to prevent the massive destruction of ecosystems, to recognize ecocide in order to prevent our extinction. Chrysa Antonakos Samaras and the connection with Greece. Since the 1940s, Chrysa Vardea Mavromichali had already developed the form of urban calligraphy on the streets of Athens during her route to school with chalk. When Chrysa was a child, World War II was ongoing. Germans and Italians had occupied Athens. After 8 p.m., anyone found outdoors was executed, she recalled. However, there was a Greek underground informing people about significant events. They wrote messages secretly on building walls in the darkness of night. Afterwards, some brave souls would venture out to read the news before the enemy could erase it. Examining Chrysa's entire body of work alongside her contemporary Greek peers, we could note that she historically might be the first artist to introduce new materials, such as neon light, into the visual arts, along with a fresh poetic approach to illumination. Throughout her work, light has a central role, but in a manner different from the Western tradition, where light emerges from shadow. It is closer to ancient cultures, primarily inspired by ancient Greece and Japanese calligraphy. We might consider groundbreaking Chrysa's approach of bringing art into dialogue with science, and further, that she was the first among Greek artists to depict urban landscapes at a time when other visual artists exclusively focused on nature. The element of repetition and rhythmic structure signifies her profound connection with the framework of nature and consequently reveals her relationship with natural science, which studies and records natural phenomena. Art and science complement each other. The gates. When Chrisa moved to New York, she discovered new stimuli for her work. I wanted to see the reflections of Times Square. In my eyes, it appeared as a garden of lights. I wanted to paint what I saw, she explains, continuing, but I knew I couldn't convey what I felt using traditional painting materials. I needed a very different medium, and I concluded that it would be the same medium producing that luminous garden. The letters, neon tubes, and their dazzling combinations. And that's how I began working with letters and lights. Ancient Greece and Byzantium. Chrisa's iconic work, The Gates to Times Square, was presented to the public in New York's Grand Central Station as part of the 1968 City Sculpture exhibit. She herself connects the Byzantine Empire with Times Square. At the same time, she associates it with ancient Greece, referring to Times Square as an acropolis of synapse communication. It was a luminous garden, she says, continuing. I saw Times Square with its lights and letters, realizing it was as beautiful and difficult as Japanese calligraphy. In Times Square, the sky is like the gold in Byzantine mosaics or icons. Ancient Greece. Birds engaged in battle occupied Chrisa's imagination as a subject starting in 1956 during her projections period. Influenced by Euripides' Iphigenia, Chrisa created her second blacklight sculpture after Clytemnestra in 1967, titled A Flock of Morning Birds, study number 15. The sea wind, eagerly awaited by Homer's Greeks, is symbolized by the morning flight of birds and the seabirds of Aeolus. In A Flock of Morning Birds, study number 15, references to ancient Greek mythology are evident, whereas neon light technology contrasts sharply with the natural landscape themes. Chrisa's work titled Flight of Birds consists of irregular square dots resembling a typewriter's keyboard, representing the flight of migratory birds in tight formation. Each cast aluminum piece, painted white, appears to diffuse from the white surface it rests on. She herself refers to the concept of static light, as she calls it. She states, the form is static. It is not made dynamic by the source of light or electricity. The problem posed is essentially structural. The elements, often white on a white surface, create a dark shadow, doubling the actual structure of the form while dematerializing its contours. We consider that Chrisa's particular sensitivity towards structural forms that dematerialize expresses her concern with nature, which serves as inspiration throughout her body of work. She frequently references natural structures, such as the grids formed by leaf veins, revisiting them through repetition. Such structures often appear in her work using materials like aluminum and neon, pioneering media at her time to depict a sense of classicism and archetypes linked to the past. Stephen Antonakos. Stephen Antonakos, like Krisa, uses neon light as a central material in his work. However, Antonakos employs neon quite differently. Unlike Krisa, who emphasizes rhythmic structures of black and white through timed blinking lights in her sculptures, Antonakos uses neon formalistically, focusing primarily on color. He intervenes in large buildings using vividly colored neon lights, reconstructing their architectural form and creating a mystical atmosphere within the purity of geometric shapes. Frequent references to the Greek natural landscape and to his birthplace, Agios Nikolaos in Mani, are apparent in his work. In the image, we can see the piece titled The Sky of Mani from his series of wall-mounted panels, combining painting and relief neon lights. Additional light emanates from behind the canvas, softening the edges of its rectangular geometric shape. The natural landscapes light consistently interests Antonakos throughout his career, while his references to Byzantine history are evident. Antonakos' own comments about the sky are noteworthy. The city can be just as competitive as the sky, which, after all, is the most competitive thing around us. It would be ridiculous to attempt making things bigger, flashier, in harsh contrast, and so forth in the city. If people can, for a fraction of time, be moved to perceive, that is all I hope for. In the panel series, which includes The Sky of Mani, the expanded significance of light in Antonakos' work becomes evident. These are flat wooden surfaces covered with aluminum leaf, gold or silver leaf, or painted boldly, illuminated uniformly or variously by neon lights placed behind, creating an aura of light around each piece. Byzantine art's influence is clear. The panels bear titles dedicated to saints of the Greek Orthodox Church, ancient Greek cities, and Antonakos' relatives. Chapels. Since 1990, Stylianos Antonakos began creating models for chapels. Particularly notable is their connection to Greek architecture, specifically the White Island houses, fully integrated into the natural landscape. Antonakos' chapels function as spaces for contemplation, where the concept of religion acquires universal dimensions. At the end of the 20th century, an era characterized by rampant materialism and cynicism, Stephen Antonakos provocatively dedicates the energy of his artistic practice to the ancient tradition of the mystical nature of light. I remember how dark it was inside the houses in the village of Agios Nikolaos in Laconia, Greece, where I lived before my family moved to New York. There, the entire world was dark, and only the small, tiny lights from our modest homes seemed to merge with the stars in the vast yet crystal-clear atmosphere of the night sky. The first chapel built as full-scale was the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder for the Venice Biennale in 1997, when Antonakos represented Greece, curated by Eretria. The Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder is now housed at the State Museum of Contemporary Art in Thessaloniki. We recognize connections to ancient Greek philosophy and Antonakos' work. fire holes. Anaximander believed that 4 elements, water, earth, air, and fire, intertwined and were often in opposition due to their differing compositions. The fire holes series was created in 1970 during Antonakos' semester teaching at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It documents an artistic act with performance characteristics in which Antonakos decided to burn an entire stack of his drawings. According to the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, the world is created by fire through opposition and war among contrary forces. Antonakos himself says, "In this work, I wanted to use real fire. I stacked many drawings and burned them, stopping the burning at a precise moment. Knowing exactly when to stop is always a crucial decision." Finally, noteworthy are the artist's words reflecting his profound belief in nature's energy flow. During our time on Earth, each of us is, among many other things, a conduit. The things and events of the world pass through us, and we shape them in our own way and return them to the world. Loukas Samaras. Loukas Samaras, like Stephen Antonakos and Chrysa, has a distinctive relationship with light, attributing to it a magical quality as a contemporary Byzantine shaman. When Samaras was invited to Yale in 1969 to give a lecture, he appeared as a modern Prometheus with a suitcase containing 19 different kinds of fire. He wanted students to select a word and create a sculptural representation of it. His example was fire. The shadow game, having a cardboard skeleton covered with wax to resemble a face, then placing the figure near a lit candle so that it would start melting. A reenactment of Athanasios Diakos' burning behind a white sheet of paper. The Samaras family owned an orchard in Mavrovo, which Loukas frequently visited during spring and summer throughout his early years in Greece until age 13, when he moved with his mother to New York. These regular visits significantly shaped his future relationship with nature, evident throughout his work. Influences from Greek mythology and the Greek natural landscape are clearly visible in his artistic journey. While studying at Douglas College and Rutgers University, Samaras took advantage of opportunities to explore other fields of contemporary expression, including dance and literature. In 1961, Loukas Samaras completed the short story called The Bird and the Porcupine Kid. Photofictions, mythology, birds, light. In the artwork Conflict 23, Loukas Samaras assumes the most hybrid of forms. His torso merges with the tail of a brown duck, seemingly invoking his ancient Greek heritage by recalling the fantastical creatures of Greek mythology, such as the Chimera with the head of a lion, body of a goat, and tail of a dragon, or the centaur with the body of a horse and a torso of a man. Loukas Samaras explains how he sees himself in relation to nature, his surroundings, and history. For instance, in the artwork Shima 50, we can see a tiny figure of the artist himself decorating the metopes of a colonnade in imitation of the ancient iconic order in Central Park. The presence of the fake colonnade is highly ironic, yet its use by Samaras in this context connects it with ancient Greek culture and his heritage. It serves as a reference both to ancient Greece and contemporary America in a current postmodern version. We consider Samaras's choice to position himself on the metope particularly intriguing, as we feel the sense of scale in New York City is very different compared to the feeling one experiences when visiting an ancient Greek temple. Among skyscrapers, one feels small as an ant, whereas in contrast, an ancient Greek temple is built to human scale. The sunset, visible in the scene, reminds us of mortality, whereas Samaras himself, in contrast, poses like an ancient Greek god facing the decay of time. All of Samaras's writings reflect his admiration for nature, its power and beauty, as seen in his poetic response to the spectacular changes in the sky observed from his apartment on the 62nd floor. Particularly notable in his expressive description of the panorama of the New York sky, articulated with phrases such as perfect view of the sparkling sunset over Jersey, or behind the dark cloud, the sun pours warm glittering gold onto the part of the Hudson stumbling past New York. The artwork Fact ID 34 belongs to the photofiction series. In this piece, a majestic white heron gracefully moves its wings as it dominates the skies above Manhattan buildings, painted deep red by the sunset against the winter sky, colored blue and yellow. Nature's beauty competes directly with the urban landscape of New York. The connection of the bird with the glittering box can be traced back in 1959 in Samaras' story titled Pythia, where one of the characters is a three-legged peacock. The bird is also an image reminiscent of Samaras' childhood memories of swallows building nests under balconies, glittering birds in cages on terraces, storks nesting in the chimneys of old houses in Castoria, and more threatening memories from myths of harpies and abductions by eagles. All these have multiple contradictory meanings and associations. Does the bird have the ability to build its nest, fly away, and return again? Thus, like the boxes, the birds became a kind of symbol of his father in America. It was also a symbol of himself and his sense of helplessness during childhood. I hated the idea of a bird inside a cage. I was in a cage myself. Water. In the artwork Mirrored Embrace, we sense fluidity because the mirror evokes the element of water. In many cultures, water symbolizes purification. Perhaps it represents a form of baptism for the viewer, psychologically stripped bare by the shaman-like Samaras during the time spent exploring the interior of this installation. Mirrored Embrace is an installation of mirrors, inviting viewers to enter alone, seeing their reflection multiplied infinitely, losing any sense of gravity, and confronting the narcissistic habit of gazing into mirrors. However, in Samaras's work, looking into the mirror carries an element of violence and threat. viewers watch themselves dematerialize, similar to the manner depicted in Byzantine iconography. The viewer's reflection is replaced by light and the psychedelic, fragmented depiction of their form, guiding us to two extremes. On one side, nightclubs with giant disco balls made of tiny mirrors, and on the other, a search for sacred introspection and the need for internal and external balance, as occurs in places intended for medication. This particular work was presented gradually in multiple versions. We find it compelling that it references the ancient Greek labyrinth, prompting thoughts that Loukas Samaras might be considered a contemporary Minotaur, a shaman guiding viewers through a mysterious ritual of initiation and wandering into the labyrinth of their own minds, artistically represented as a maze. One could imagine Samaras, mindful of the ancient myth of the palace of Knossos, constructing this labyrinth and concluding with mirrors and reflections, indirectly implying the presence of the contemporary Minotaur through his absence. It allows viewers to imagine his presence, activating their senses. The feeling of threat is intensely present in the artist's installations. The work references the labyrinthine structure found in Knossos Palace, while simultaneously using mirrors as a reference to Byzantium. The mirror served as a weapon for Byzantines, dazzling enemies with a blinding reflection of sunlight, aiming to disorient and render them vulnerable. The use of the mirror as a reflective surface in Loukas Samaras' works relates directly to the artist's visual perception of the concept of infinite space found in Byzantine art. We can see the correlation of the work Chair Transformation number 25A with the custom of the epitaph. Plastic flowers are the construction material of the throne chair, perhaps suggesting the lack of water that would come in the future.